Good morning, everyone. I think we can start now if you have taken your places. My name is Hélène Sader, and I will be delivering this first lecture on the Epic of Gilgamesh. I hope you will enjoy it and you will understand it. This Epic of Gilgamesh, before we start dealing with Gilgamesh, I would like to welcome you all to this first CS lecture. I understand that you are having, this semester. Now, as you may know, AUB and the Faculty of Arts and Sciences are celebrating or celebrated last year their 150th anniversary. And AUB is proud to be a liberal arts institution of higher learning. You may have heard this term, institution, liberal arts institution, for many years. I don't know why it's not working. You may wonder what liberal arts institution mean. Okay? This means very simply that at the undergraduate level, AUB does not intend to form professionals, but rather people who can think critically and rationally, that is, with rational arguments. People who are broad-minded, who have been exposed to the cultures that have shaped modern man, people who are aware how man's view of the universe, of the gods, of himself, has evolved across the centuries to shape what we are today. People who can be challenged in their beliefs and in their opinions, and who can engage in a rational dialogue with their fellow men. At the heart of this liberal arts education is the Civilization Studies program, or Civilization Sequence program, as you want to call it. Now, how is CS at the heart of liberal education? You may ask. Let me very briefly, as a short introduction, tell you what CS is about. CS courses stand at a crossroad of different disciplines, such as literature, philosophy, history, social sciences, natural sciences, and others. However, in CS, we do not look at these texts from the point of view of the specialists. We don't look at Gilgamesh from the point of view of the Assyriologist, or the cuneiform studies, or the historians of Mesopotamia. We look at it from the perspective of CS, and I'll tell you what this perspective is. What we want to explore in these texts is man, his role, his ideas, his beliefs, his values in each specific cultural framework or context. CS courses consist exclusively of texts representative of Eastern and Western culture that were shaped on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea from earliest antiquity or early history to modern times. While reading the texts, we shall try to understand the point of view of the text itself, not our own, but what the author is trying to tell us. And the best approach to do this is to explore the basic notions and concepts found in the texts, like, for example, happiness, justice, good and evil, friendship, love, death. How did these people conceive of all these, values? But these notions and concepts are often not bluntly or directly expressed in the text. They don't give us definitions of what is justice or what is love. They are hinted at in an indirect way by symbols. So if you want to understand the message of these texts properly, we have to read the symbols, to analyze and to interpret them. This is the main purpose of the CS lecture. Today, what we are going to listen to what basic concepts the Epic of Gilgamesh is about. What do they want to tell us, the readers of their time, and we today, after 3,000 years, readers of the 21st century. The lecture intends to help you understand the text by pointing out to you the main issues that you can further analyze and discuss in class. But of course, if you want to have interesting discussion sessions, and express an opinion of your own, you have to have read the assigned text. Now, what is the appropriate way to analyze the text that you are reading? Since the CS approach is mainly concerned with man, the most useful way is to analyze the three basic relationships of man in the world. What are these relationships? The first is the relation of man with himself. How does man come to terms with himself, with his human condition? Who am I? Where do I come from? What am I doing here? What is the purpose of my life? This is what I mean with that man should come to terms with himself. The second basic relationship of man is with his fellow man. How he tries to come to terms with other human beings, what sort of social relationship he has. And this is what we call the social or communal level of the analysis. And finally, the third relationship of man is with the universe, the cosmos, that is nature, the supernatural forces or powers such as gods, fate, chance, that are affecting his life and over which he has no control. This is the cosmological level of the analysis. So the CS program studies human culture in its various expressions. It broadens our understanding of man, of our own, as well as of other cultures. It is therefore an essential part of a liberal education. This is why CS will broaden your understanding, will broaden your horizons, will teach you to understand and assess and evaluate, other cultures, see what is good in them, what you feel is good, what you feel is bad, what did they bring to mankind, and so on and so forth. So now let's turn to our text, the Epic of Gilgamesh. What is an epic? First of all, an epic is a poem involving heroes, meaning men endowed with superhuman powers, and gods. So heroes and gods. Epics have a twofold purpose. Why did people write epics? First, to entertain the reader, their audience, because at the beginning people did not read, they only sat and listened, like the Hakawetis. They heard them, the poems being sung or being told by, poets, or the audience. And second, to give a message about the values, the philosophical, social, and moral standards of a given society at a certain time. So, twofold purpose. We will look at the entertaining and at the message behind the Epic of Gilgamesh. In the epic, the hero or heroes represent all these values, and they become the symbols or the representatives of their society and their time. The Epic of Gilgamesh is the oldest epic known to us in world literature. It is, as one great scholar puts it, the most significant literary creation of the whole of ancient Mesopotamia. Over the years, the story has been variously reworked into plays, novels, and at least 2 operas. In 2013, not very long time, away, a group of young dancers called Antiques Dancers created a hip-hop dance interpretation of the Epic of Gilgamesh. I gave you the link, on your fly sheets. So you can look at what young people your age can do and how this epic still inspires, young generation today. Finally, this year, in celebration of the SOAS centenary, the acclaimed performance storyteller Ben Haggerty came to SOAS to give his rendering of the ancient Mesopotamian Epic of Gilgamesh with musical accompaniment by SOAS alumnus Jonah Brody. So in one of the most prestigious schools of sociology and history of England, the performance was on the Epic of Gilgamesh. So you can see that Gilgamesh has not lost its interest for a modern audience. So since the Epic of Gilgamesh is the only sample of Mesopotamian literature that we read in CS, and since most of you, I presume, are not familiar with Mesopotamian civilization, let us dwell for a few minutes on the homeland of Gilgamesh so that you understand better the circumstances of the epic. Mesopotamia, as you can see on your slide, is the name given by the Greeks to what is today modern Iraq and northeast Syria. It means in Greek, the land between the rivers. In Arabic, it is called Bilad al-Rafidain or Bilad ma bayn al-Nahrain, the two rivers being the Euphrates and the Tigris, Furat wa Dijla. The geographical setting of our epic is the Mesopotamian south, the southern part of Mesopotamia, where you can read Sumer and Akkad written on your map. This part of Mesopotamia was called by its ancient dwellers the land of Sumer and Akkad. In Sumer, on the Euphrates, lies the city of Uruk, which is one of the oldest cities of the ancient Near East and the homeland of Gilgamesh. The hero of our epic, Gilgamesh, was a Sumerian king of Uruk. The Sumerians were the earliest settlers known to us that inhabited South Mesopotamia. Their language cannot be compared with, nor can it be affiliated to any language we know today. The Sumerians were the first inventors of writing. They are the ones who developed and used what we call the cuneiform script that you see here on the slide, and they wrote on clay tablets, not on papyrus or on, leather, but on clay tablets. This is why thousands, hundreds of thousands of them survive until this day. The Sumerians were the first inventors of writing, and they were predominantly urban people. They lived in big fortified cities, and their land was divided into several small kingdoms. Together with the Sumerians lived another population group north of their country called Akkadians, after the name of their city, Akkad. These people differed from the Sumerians in that they spoke a language which belongs to the same linguistic family as Arabic and Hebrew. This linguistic family is commonly known as Semitic. All right, so they spoke a Semitic language. The Akkadians obviously came from a different cultural background than the Sumerians, but they lived peacefully for centuries with them. And the peaceful cultural interaction between Sumerians and Akkadians lasted almost 1,000 years. Akkadian rule became predominant in Mesopotamia around 2000 BC, and the Akkadian language progressively replaced Sumerian as both the spoken and the literary or official language of the country. Now back to our epic. Gilgamesh, who is a king of Uruk, is now believed to have been a real, historical, and not a legendary figure of Uruk. He was a Sumerian king who ruled some 4,500 years ago and who became, after his death, like many other great kings in antiquity, the hero of many tales, like Antara, like Alexander the Great, like Moses, like all these big names of history. They become the heroes of many legends, of many myths. In these tales, he was given a semi-divine and superhuman features. All right? He's not a simple human like you and me. The tales about him, were first transmitted orally by word of mouth. It is only later on that several of these tales or stories were fixed in writing in the Sumerian language. Five of these stories about Gilgamesh came down to us. These tales were originally not connected. They dealt with different stories about Gilgamesh. In other words, they did not form a unit, a whole complete story, or one single epic. It is only in the final phase of the epic's evolution, almost a millennium after the hero's death, that these tales were joined together into a literary composition with a unified theme and a meaningful plot. This final, integrated, and coherent version of the epic is written in Akkadian, that is, in the Semitic language of Mesopotamia. It is the final text that you are going to read and that you are going to discuss in this lecture. The most complete standard version of the text was written on 12 clay tablets, and it was discovered for the first time in the library of the Assyrian king Assurbanipal, that you see on the slide, who ruled between 669 and 625 BC in Nineveh, in northern Iraq. You must have heard a lot about the plain of Nineveh these days because of the ongoing war in northern Iraq. The text of the standard version is partly destroyed and some passages remain obscure. The discovery of some 50 fragments of the epic in various sites of the ancient Near East, because our epic was very popular and was transmitted to all the cities of the ancient Near East, it enabled scholars to fill some of these gaps and to improve our understanding of the text. Now the story. The final Akkadian version of the epic appears to have been more interested in the message its author saw in Gilgamesh's life rather than in Gilgamesh himself. This message is concerned with people's attitudes towards life and death. The story begins by introducing the hero to us. What does the text say about Gilgamesh? He calls it Wild Bull of Lugalbanda. Lugalbanda is his father. Gilgamesh, the perfect in strength, suckling of the august wild cow, the goddess Ninsun. Gilgamesh was his name from the day he was born, 2/3 of him God and 1/3 human. So from his mother, the goddess Ninsun, he inherited beauty and restlessness. From his human father, Lugalbanda, he inherited our fate, all of us, mortality. So in the epic, Gilgamesh is characterized by tremendous vigor and energy. He harasses the young man and the young girls of Uruk and takes them away from their families. The text tells us no son is left with his father, for Gilgamesh takes them all, even the children. Yet the king should be a shepherd to his people, not somebody who harasses his people. His lust leaves no virgin to her lover, neither the warrior's daughter nor the wife of the noble. So he was not such a very nice man at the beginning. The people of Uruk, of course, were not happy with this oppressive situation. They complained to whom? If you have a king and he is the ultimate power, they complain to who is more powerful, that is, the gods. And the gods perceived with remarkable insight that it was Gilgamesh's superior energy and strength which set him apart and made him feel lonely. Nobody could cope with him. Nobody had the strength he had. So he needed a friend that is someone who measured up to him. So the gods created a counterpart to Gilgamesh. And this counterpart is called Enkidu. The gods cried to Aruru. Aruru is one of these mother goddesses who helped in the creation of mankind in Mesopotamian religion. So the gods cried to Aruru, the goddess of creation. You made him, O Aruru. Now create his equal. Let it be as his own reflection, his second self, stormy heart for stormy heart. So Enkidu was created and he was born not in the city like Gilgamesh, but in the steppe. The steppe is the wild area around the city of Uruk. He represents man in the state of nature. He lives with and like the wild animals of the steppe. You know certainly one example that was done recently for children, Mowgli, you know, the Lion King. So you can see that the idea of a child born in the jungle or that eats and lives with the wild animals is an idea that was taken again, by modern movies. So one day, a trapper sees him destroying the traps set to catch the wild animals. He makes his way to Uruk, appeals to Gilgamesh, and asks for a woman from the city, a harlot, to go with him to try and seduce Enkidu. His request is granted, and for a whole week, Enkidu enjoys himself with Shamkhat, the harlot. When he wants to go back to his animal companions, after the experience he had with the woman, the animals shy away from him. They feel that he's not like them anymore. He has lost his old power, and he has lost his speed. Enkidu leaves the steppe with the harlot. He meets the shepherds, those who live outside the city with their flocks, and finally goes to the city of Uruk. There he meets Gilgamesh and fights with him. Out of their battle grows a lasting friendship. Gilgamesh and Enkidu achieve together great deeds. They go to the cedar mountain and kill the monster Humbaba. Here he is, very dreadful monster. Upon their return, the goddess Ishtar, who is the main goddess of the Akkadians, she's a goddess of love and war, falls in love with Gilgamesh and asks him to marry her. Gilgamesh insolently refuses this offer and reminds her of the fate of all her former lovers whom she killed. So upset by his refusal, Ishtar goes to her father Anu, the god of heavens, and asks him to give her the bull of heaven, another monster, in order to destroy Gilgamesh. The two friends fight against the bull and kill him. So they are beside themselves with success, with pride, and the two friends defy and insult the gods. They had gone too far, and this insolence brought upon them the punishment, the retribution of the gods. Enlil, the god of the air, decided by decree that Enkidu should die. So Enkidu's death is the central event in the epic. It is the event that brings the focus upon the main theme of the epic, namely Gilgamesh's quest for immortality. After the loss of his friend, Gilgamesh becomes obsessed by death and tries to win real immortality. He doesn't want to die. He wants to become immortal, like a god. In his quest for everlasting life, he goes to meet Utnapishtim, the Mesopotamian counterpart of biblical Noah, the only person who survived the flood and the only man who was granted immortality by the gods. On his way to him, Gilgamesh meets Siduri, the winemaker, who sees the hopelessness of his quest and tries to dissuade him, to tell him, please don't go, this is not going to be a successful quest. Gilgamesh doesn't listen, of course. He goes on, and after many hardships, finds Utnapishtim. Utnapishtim gives him 2 chances to win immortality. And twice, Gilgamesh fails. But he fails because of his human weakness, of his negligence. And this failure, after this failure, Gilgamesh goes back to Uruk, convinced that the only immortality man can seek is in achievement. So these events, the story that I just described, these extraordinary adventures, the suspense accompanying Gilgamesh's quest, are the entertaining side of the epic. However, entertainment, as we said, was not the only purpose of the epic. The epic conveyed a message. It explored some basic questions, such as, what is it to be a man for the Mesopotamians? How should we come to terms with our human condition, with our fate, with the fact that eventually we will die someday? What is the meaning of life? Why is life worth living? How should we live it knowing that death is inescapable. The epic does not only ask these questions, but it also tries to give some answers. So let's first look at their view of man. Let's first try to see how the epic views man. Otherwise said, what was it for the Mesopotamians to be a man? It's a question. They answered it. This question is partly answered by the early life and transformation of Enkidu. As you have already pointed out, Enkidu is pictured as living with and like wild animals, ignorant of man's ways, that is, ignorant of civilization, of urban life. Before he could become civilized, he needed to be humanized. In the state of nature, animal-like, he was not a man in the eyes of the Mesopotamian author. The process of his humanization is very clearly described. It starts when he meets the harlot, a woman brought by the trapper. What happens when he meets her and spends with her a whole week? What happens to Enkidu? His body was bound as though with a cord. His knees gave way when he started to run. His swiftness was gone. Enkidu was grown weak, for wisdom was in him, and the thoughts of a man were in his heart. This means that his contact with a woman broadened his understanding, awakened his human intelligence. What he acquired from intercourse with the harlot was the intellectual potential, power, capacity to adopt human ways and to desire human companionship. So it is through contact with another human being that he is humanized. Now that his intelligence is awakened through this contact, he can become a man. That is, a human being desiring to live with other human beings in a civilized world. His animal-like aspect has disappeared, and the harlot tells him, "You are wise, Enkidu, and now you have become like a god." So, for the Mesopotamians, man is neither an animal nor a god. He is godlike, meaning endowed with intelligence, with knowledge, and capable of civilization. So when Enkidu meets the shepherds, he is capable of imitating them, imitating their ways, learning their ways. And it is only then that the process of his humanization is accomplished. I quote from the text, "Then the woman said, 'Enkidu, eat bread, it is the stuff of life. Drink wine, it is the custom of the land.' So he ate till he was full and drank strong wine, 7 goblets. He became merry, his heart exulted, and his face shone. He rubbed down the matted hair of his body and anointed himself with oil. Enkidu had become a man." So something magical and decisive had happened. Enkidu has made his choice. From then on, he belonged to the human race. So to be a man, in the eyes of the Mesopotamians, starts by desiring human companionship and by knowing and adopting civilization. But this is only part of the answer to the question of what man is. The epic goes further and deeper in its exploration of man's identity, and the answer is given at the very end of the epic of Gilgamesh by Gilgamesh himself. What Gilgamesh, the great hero and king of Uruk, has learned from his failure in his quest for immortality is very simply the awareness that he, meaning man, is mortal. The awareness that death is man's lot, man's share, man's sad condition is formulated here in this epic for the first time in human history and in human literature. So to be a man is first and foremost to be finite, to be mortal. Man is neither an animal like Enkidu, nor a god like Utnapishtim, who had gained everlasting life. Man is like Gilgamesh, an intelligent, civilized person, capable of great achievements, desirous of gaining knowledge, but whose destiny is ultimately to die. This leads us to another question posed by the Epic of Gilgamesh. How does man react to this inescapable fate, to death? How do you react when you think about death? What would be your reaction if you sit one day and you think, what should I do? What am I going to do to face this fate that I have, my death? Man's attitude towards death is the major theme of the epic, and the various attitudes or reactions that humans tend to adopt are exemplified in the epic by a single figure, that of Gilgamesh. In the beginning, the young and restless king of Uruk had only one concern: to achieve great deeds that no one before him had accomplished, and thus leave an enduring name. That is why he tells Enkidu, who is reluctant and afraid to go to kill Khumbaba, the monster, the personification of evil. He says, in response, Gilgamesh tells him, then if I fall, if I go to Khumbaba, but I die, I cannot kill him, but he kills me. If I fall, I leave behind me a name that endures. Men will say of me, Gilgamesh has fallen in fight with ferocious Khumbaba. Gilgamesh knew that he had eventually to die, but he tells Enkidu, only the gods live forever with glorious Shamat. But as for us men, our days are numbered. I know this, but I want to become famous even after I die, so that everyone would remember the great things I did. As this quotation clearly shows, death was known to Gilgamesh. But for him, since he had to die anyway, he wanted it to be a glorious death, in battle with a worthy foe or enemy, so that his name and fame would live. So his first attitude towards death, like the attitude of several of us today, was to seek immortality through fame. His youth, his success, his extraordinary deeds made him feel godlike, invincible, invulnerable, to the point that he dared defy the great goddess Ishtar. At the climax of his success, he became arrogant, irrespectful of the gods, and forgetful of the fact that he was but a mortal. But when Enkidu, his only and very dear friend, his second self, his counterpart, dies, everything collapsed around him. With the death of Enkidu, death touches him in its stark reality. Before, death was something in the abstract. But now, Gilgamesh refuses with all his soul to accept death as real. The loss he has suffered is unbearable. He stands puzzled before death, before the lifeless corpse of Enkidu. This fear of death becomes an obsession with Gilgamesh. The thought that he, young, beautiful, strong Gilgamesh, must die haunted him day and night and left him no peace. With the awareness that eventually he himself will die, all his previous values collapsed. Enduring name, immortal fame suddenly meant nothing to him anymore. Real, physical immortality, an impossible goal, was the only thing Gilgamesh now wanted. He had heard about an ancestor of his, Utnapishtim, who had gained eternal life. He decided to go to learn the secret of his immortality. The story of the flood, told to him by Utnapishtim, shows that the case of Utnapishtim was unique and could never happen again. Utnapishtim is aware of that, but he wants to prove to Gilgamesh the futility and the impossibility of his quest. He challenges him to resist sleep for a week. But understandably enough, Gilgamesh fails. His failure proves how utterly impossible is his hope for energy strong enough to overcome death. When the snake snatches the plant of rejuvenation away from him, that is the plant which can make Gilgamesh young again, he loses his last hope for immortality. The second failure, too, was due to his basic human weakness, a moment of carelessness. In other words, his quest for actual immortality defied and challenged human nature itself, the very condition of being human, mortal, and finite. For the first time, as he fails twice in his undertaking, Gilgamesh is completely deprived of any heroic stature or dimension. Only then does he come back to his senses. Only then does he see himself as pitiful. And he weeps, he cries. The panic, the fear of death leaves him. And this brings his quest for immortality to an end. It has come to nothing. He has to admit final and utter defeat. So the mood in which he meets his final defeat is new and different from what he has been capable of before. It is a mood of resignation, an awareness of the irony of his fate, not one of terror and despair. He has found the peace he was looking for by having the courage to face and to accept reality. That is the fact that he is immortal. The outcome of Gilgamesh's quest is the understanding of his human condition. He acquired wisdom, and this aspect is praised in the epic more than the heroic deeds and the quest for immortality. The Epic of Gilgamesh ends by presenting a third attitude towards death. Man has to die, but what he achieves during his lifetime survives him. In other words, Gilgamesh now knows that the only immortality he can seek is in achievement. And Gilgamesh's lasting achievement stands in the walls of Uruk that survive to this day. You can see these massive walls with its rounded towers that you can see today if you go and visit the site of Uruk. This is the accomplishment, the achievement of Gilgamesh. Now, while exploring man's attitude towards death, the author of the epics makes a statement about how one ought to live one's life, knowing that death is inescapable. This message is conveyed by Siduri, the tavern keeper, whom Gilgamesh meets on his way to Utnapishtim. She tries to dissuade him by showing him the futility of his quest, since only gods are immortal. She tells him, Gilgamesh, where are you hurrying to? You will never find that life for which you are looking. When gods created man, they allotted to him death, but life they retained in their own keeping. As for you, Gilgamesh, fill your belly with good things. Day and night, night and day, dance and be merry. Feast and rejoice. Let your clothes be fresh. Bathe yourself in water. Cherish the little child that holds your hand, and make your wife happy in your embrace. For this, too, is the lot of man. So what Siduri is offering Gilgamesh is a conventional philosophy of life. This advice of hers is formulated in a way that seems addressed to the epic's audience as well, not only to Gilgamesh. The simple pleasures advocated by Siduri are something many could strive for, unlike the heroic deeds which were only for the few. The sun god Shamash addresses Enkidu more or less in the same way as Siduri addresses Gilgamesh. On his deathbed, Enkidu curses the harlot for having brought him to civilization. The sun god's response to Enkidu implies that the life to which the harlot has brought him was worth living, despite the untimely death it entailed. The sun god tells Enkidu, Enkidu, why are you cursing the woman, the mistress who taught you to eat bread fit for gods and drink wine of kings? She who put on you a magnificent garment, did she not give you glorious Gilgamesh for your companion? And has not Gilgamesh, your own brother, made you rest on a royal bed and recline on a couch at his left hand? From these lines, we understand that the epic underlines the satisfaction that civilized human life offers. In other words, that minimum amount of meaning that man's life has. This is the epic's message too. These simple pleasures, in the eyes of the Mesopotamians, were sufficient to make life worth living and enjoyable, despite the dreadful perspective of death. Man should not lose his time and energy trying to get some impossible things. He should be satisfied with simple pleasures civilized life can offer him. These passages that we just mentioned were often described as hedonistic. Hedonism means to seek pleasure and avoid pain. The Epic of Gilgamesh shows us also how man understood and explained his relation with the supernatural powers which affected his life and destiny. As we can gather from our text, the Mesopotamians believed in a great number of gods and monsters, some of whom you meet in the epic, like Anu, the god of heaven, Enlil, the god of the air, Enki or Ea, the god of wisdom and of the sweet underground waters, Ishtar, the goddess of love and war, the sun god Shamash, Humbaba, and the bull of heaven. All these gods were believed to look and act like humans, but they were more powerful, and first and foremost, they were immortal. They interfered in man's life, either by helping or by punishing him, and often by dictating their will. Moreover, their behavior and their reactions were very often unpredictable. Their decisions and their decrees were often arbitrary and unfair. Thus, the general atmosphere that we can gather from the Epic of Gilgamesh is one of insecurity, of instability, and of pessimism. From the story of the flood, we learn that man was created by the gods to be their servant, their slave, to relieve them from the menial work the gods had to do before the creation of man. In this slave-master relationship, there is no confidence, there is no reliability, no peace, no clear rule between man and the gods. Like all ancient peoples, Sumerians and Akkadians could not conceive that death was really the end. They believed in a life after death, in a place where man's spirit, or etemmu, this is how they called it, survived. Enkidu has a vision of the underworld in a dream. He knows how the underworld looks like because the gods gave him a vision of that in his dream. He says, "There is the house whose people sit in darkness. Dust is their food, and clay their meat. They are clothed like birds, with wings for covering. They see no light. They sit in darkness." Not a very nice place to go, believe me. The gloomy and depressive view of the netherworld, also called house of darkness, house of dust, land of no return, the view of life after death, described by Enkidu, deprives man from hope in something better than his earthly life and adds to his pessimism and despair. Mesopotamian man dreaded death because he viewed the underworld as a place where all earthly pleasures are absent. No more nice clothes, no more wine, no more oil to anoint yourself, no more nice bed or couch to relax on. all this doesn't exist anymore. So, confronted with such a dreadful perspective, what a poor consolation were Siduri's words, and how understandable was Gilgamesh's rebellion against his fate. Thank you for listening.